The October wind cut through Bensonhurst's narrow streets like a blade, carrying the scent of rain and fallen leaves. Marcus DeLuca adjusted his charcoal wool coat, his polished leather shoes clicking against the cracked sidewalk as evening settled over Brooklyn. Beside him, Nero moved with predatory grace, 130 pounds of solid muscle, slate-gray fur, and unwavering loyalty. The Cane Corso's massive head swiveled methodically, dark eyes scanning every shadow, every movement, every potential threat to the man holding his leather leash. Marcus had walked these streets for 45 years. He knew every corner, every shop owner, every face that appeared in windows as he passed. Respect followed him like a second shadow. Men nodded, women looked away. Children were pulled closer to their parents. This was his territory, his kingdom, and everyone knew it. The neighborhood had changed over the decades. Italian bakeries now shared blocks with Asian grocery stores and Mexican restaurants. But some things remained constant: the unspoken rules, the hierarchy, the understanding that certain men commanded certain streets. Marcus DeLuca was one of those men. "Easy, Nero," Marcus murmured as the dog's ears pricked forward. The animal had sensed something, some disturbance in the evening's rhythm. Marcus's hand tightened slightly on the leash, a gesture of control more than necessity. Nero had been trained by the best handlers in the country, animals bred and raised specifically for protection work. The dog would sooner die than disobey a command. They turned onto 18th Avenue, where the streetlights flickered to life against the deepening dusk. The temperature had dropped 10 degrees in the past hour, and Marcus could see his breath misting in the air. Halloween decorations hung from fire escapes and storefront windows. Plastic skeletons, orange lights, paper ghosts dancing in the wind. Children's laughter echoed from somewhere nearby, families preparing for the holiday weekend. Marcus didn't celebrate holidays anymore, not since Adriana died 2 years ago. Cancer had taken her in 6 brutal months, leaving him alone in their brownstone mansion with only Elena, his housekeeper, and Nero for company. His wife had been the softness in his hard life, the light in dark rooms, the one person who saw past the reputation and the power to the man underneath. Without her, Marcus had become colder, more isolated, more focused on business that required absolute control and zero sentiment. The small park appeared ahead, squeezed between apartment buildings like an afterthought of urban planning. A few benches surrounded a concrete area where neighborhood kids played basketball during the day. Now, as darkness approached, the park stood empty except for one small figure sitting motionless on a bench near the entrance. Marcus noticed her immediately. A young girl, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, wearing a thin purple jacket that offered little protection against the October chill. Her dark hair hung straight to her shoulders, and she sat with perfect stillness, hands folded in her lap, staring directly ahead at nothing in particular. Something about her absolute stillness triggered Marcus's instincts, the same instincts that had kept him alive in a dangerous world for decades. No adult accompanied her. No parent called for her from the nearby buildings. She simply sat, alone, as night descended on Brooklyn. Marcus slowed his pace, his business mind already analyzing the situation. A child alone at dusk in this neighborhood meant problems: neglect, abuse, abandonment, or worse. He should keep walking. This wasn't his concern. His world dealt in contracts and territory, money and power, not lost children in parks. But something made him pause. Maybe it was Adriana's voice in his memory, the way she would have immediately approached the girl, offered help, refused to walk past someone in need. Maybe it was simple human decency buried beneath years of calculated ruthlessness. Then everything changed. The leash snapped. Marcus heard the leather crack, saw the metal clasp separate from Nero's collar in what seemed like impossible slow motion. The leash had been top quality, reinforced, designed to hold animals twice Nero's size. But leather wore over time, and metal fatigued, and in one instant 130 pounds of trained guard dog found himself suddenly, unexpectedly free. Nero's instincts took over. An unfamiliar person, potential threat, protective protocols engaged. The massive dog launched forward, powerful legs propelling him across the sidewalk toward the small figure on the bench. His movement was pure predatory efficiency. Head low, shoulders bunched, covering the distance in seconds. "Nero, stop! Heel!" Marcus's command cut through the evening air, sharp and absolute. But the dog was already in motion, already committed to the charge. People on the street turned, saw what was happening, and reacted with predictable horror. "Run, little girl, run! Someone stop that dog! Oh my God, somebody help her!" Voices overlapped in panic. A woman screamed. A man pulled out his phone, probably to call 911. Everyone expected the same outcome. The child would see the charging animal, would scream, would try to run, and the dog's prey drive would intensify, turning a bad situation into a tragedy. But the girl didn't move. She sat perfectly still on the bench, her small body relaxed, her hands remaining folded in her lap. As Nero closed the distance, she slowly turned her head and looked directly at the approaching dog. No fear showed in her expression, no panic, just calm, measured attention, as if she were watching a familiar friend approach rather than a 130-pound attack dog moving at full speed. Marcus ran after Nero, his heart hammering in his chest, with an emotion he rarely experienced, genuine fear. Not for himself, never for himself, but for this small stranger who should be terrified but somehow wasn't. He calculated the distance, the speed, the inevitable collision, and knew he wouldn't reach them in time. "Don't run!" Marcus shouted at the girl, though his words contradicted every survival instinct. "Stay completely still. 10 feet, 5 feet, 3 feet. Nero reached the bench and stopped. The massive dog's momentum carried him forward slightly, his claws scraping concrete as he arrested his charge. He stood before the girl, breathing hard, muscles tense, and then did something that made Marcus's blood run cold with shock. Nero sat. The dog folded his powerful hindquarters, assumed a perfect sitting position, and slowly, almost gently, rested his enormous head on the girl's lap. His tail, which had been rigid during the charge, relaxed slightly. A soft sound emerged from his throat. Not a growl, not a bark, but something almost like a whine. A sound of recognition or confusion or need. The girl's small hand moved from her lap to rest on Nero's head. Her fingers, delicate and pale against the dog's dark fur, moved with practiced confidence, scratching behind his ears in exactly the way Nero preferred. The dog's eyes closed partially, and his massive body relaxed completely, all aggression draining away as if it had never existed. Marcus stopped running. He stood 10 feet away, breathing hard, his mind struggling to process what he was witnessing. In 5 years of owning Nero, the dog had never shown affection to strangers. He tolerated Elena because Marcus commanded it. He ignored everyone else with professional indifference. But here now, with this unknown child, Nero behaved as if he'd found something he'd been searching for, some connection his canine mind recognized but couldn't explain. "You're a good boy," the girl said softly, her voice carrying clearly in the shocked silence that had fallen over the street. "You're such a good boy. You were just doing your job, weren't you? Protecting him?" She looked up at Marcus then, her eyes meeting his directly. They were brown, deep, and intelligent, holding none of the fear or uncertainty a child her age should feel after nearly being attacked by a guard dog. Instead, Marcus saw something that disturbed him profoundly. Sadness. Old sadness. The kind of sadness that came from loss and loneliness and experiences no 8-year-old should have. "He won't hurt me," she said, still stroking Nero's head. "He knows." "Knows what?" Marcus heard himself ask, his voice rougher than intended. "That I'm not afraid." The girl's hand continued its rhythmic movement through Nero's fur. Animals can always tell when someone's genuinely not afraid. It's not the same as pretending to be brave. It's just not being afraid at all. Marcus approached slowly, carefully, his eyes moving between the girl and his dog. Nero remained perfectly calm, his tail now moving in slow, contented sweeps across the concrete. The animal showed no interest in leaving the girl's side, no response to Marcus's presence beyond a brief glance of acknowledgement. "What's your name?" Marcus asked, crouching down to bring himself closer to the girl's eye level. Up close, he noticed more details. The purple jacket was worn at the elbows, the sneakers on her feet were scuffed and too small, and a thin silver chain hung around her neck, disappearing beneath her shirt collar. "Sophia," she answered simply. "Sophia Chen." The name triggered nothing in Marcus's memory. Chen suggested Asian heritage, though the girl's features showed some mixed background. Her skin held a light olive tone. Her eyes had a slight epicanthic fold, but her facial structure suggested European ancestry as well. She was small for what Marcus guessed was 8 or 9 years old, possibly malnourished, definitely not being properly cared for based on her clothing and overall appearance. "Where are your parents, Sophia?" Something flickered across her face. Pain, quickly hidden. "My mom died. I don't have anyone else." The blunt honesty of childhood. No sugarcoating, no hedging, just raw truth delivered in a flat, emotionless voice that suggested she'd said these words many times before. "Where do you live? Who takes care of you?" Sophia's hand stilled on Nero's head. The dog sensed the change in her emotional state and pressed closer, offering animal comfort in the only way he knew how. "I live in Philadelphia." Lived. "I was staying with my aunt after my mom died, but she died 3 weeks ago. They put me in a foster home, but I left. I had to find someone." Marcus's instincts screamed warnings. Runaway foster child. Police would be looking. Getting involved meant complications, questions, attention, all things a man in his position avoided. The smart move was to call the authorities, let the system handle it, walk away. But something kept him crouched there, his expensive wool coat touching dirty concrete, his carefully maintained distance from human vulnerability cracking slightly. Maybe it was the way Nero continued to rest against this child. The dog's behavior so contrary to his training that it suggested something beyond normal canine perception. Maybe it was the pendant he'd noticed around Sophia's neck. Now that he was closer, he could see part of it. A distinctive design that nagged at his memory like a forgotten song. "Who did you come to find?" he asked quietly. Sophia looked at him, and in her eyes, Marcus saw something that made his blood run cold. Recognition. This child, this stranger, looked at him as if she knew exactly who he was. Not his reputation, not his power, not the carefully constructed public image of Marcus DeLuca, legitimate businessman. She looked at him as if she saw something deeper, something hidden, something true. "I came to find my father," Sophia said, her voice steady, despite the enormous weight of the statement. "My mom told me stories before she died. She said if anything ever happened to her, I should come to Brooklyn. She said I should go to the park on 18th Avenue and wait. She said someone would find me here." Marcus's heart, that organ he'd trained to remain steady through violence and betrayal and loss, skipped a beat. No. Impossible. He'd been careful, always careful. There were no loose ends, no unexpected children, no secrets waiting to surface after years of silence. But even as his mind rejected the possibility, his eyes traced Sophia's features with new attention. The shape of her jaw, the set of her eyes, the way she held herself with unconscious dignity despite her obvious poverty and fear, and that pendant. He could see more of it now as she shifted slightly, a distinctive design he'd only seen once before, 12 years ago, on a woman who'd saved his life and then disappeared. "What was your mother's name?" The question came out rougher than intended, weighted with implications Marcus didn't want to consider. "Rachel. Rachel Chen. She was a nurse." Sophia reached beneath her shirt collar and pulled out the pendant, holding it up in the fading light. "She gave me this before she died. She said it would help you remember her." The pendant caught the streetlight. A small silver design, handcrafted, unique. A medical caduceus intertwined with an Italian horn, combined in a way that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. Marcus had given that pendant to a woman 12 years ago, during 3 weeks that existed outside his normal life, outside his marriage, outside everything he knew about himself. Rachel Chen, the nurse who'd treated him after an assassination attempt, the woman who'd hidden him in her small apartment for 3 weeks while he recovered, asking no questions about the bullet wound or the men looking for him. The woman with whom he'd shared something he'd never shared with anyone else. Absolute vulnerability, absolute trust, absolute honesty about who and what he was. And then she disappeared. He'd gone to her apartment one morning to find it empty, cleared out overnight. No forwarding address, no explanation. He'd searched, of course, used every resource at his disposal, but Rachel Chen had vanished as completely as if she'd never existed. Eventually, he'd stopped looking. Eventually, he'd convinced himself it was better that way, safer for her to be far away from his world. Now, 12 years later, her daughter sat on a bench in his neighborhood, petting his dog, claiming to be looking for a father. Looking for him. Sophia, Marcus said carefully, his mind racing through implications and possibilities and dangers. It's getting dark. It's not safe for you to be out here alone. Let me take you somewhere warm, get you something to eat, and we can figure this out properly. He expected resistance, questions, the natural wariness any child should show toward a strange adult. But Sophia simply nodded, as if she'd been expecting exactly this response. She stood, one hand still resting on Nero's head, and the dog rose with her, pressing against her side protectively. He likes you, Marcus said, picking up the broken leash from the ground. Nero doesn't like anyone. My mom told me I had a way with animals, Sophia replied, falling into step beside him as they began walking back toward Marcus's brownstone. She said I got that from my father. She said he had a big dog too, and the dog would know me if we ever met. Marcus said nothing. His mind churned with memories, calculations, fears he didn't want to name. Around them, the neighborhood watched with varying degrees of curiosity and concern. Marcus DeLuca walking with a small, unknown child would generate talk, questions, attention. But somehow, at this moment, he didn't care. Across the street, partially hidden in the doorway of a closed dry cleaner, Detective James Morrison lowered his camera. He'd been following Marcus for 6 weeks as part of an ongoing federal investigation into the DeLuca family's business operations. He'd documented meetings, photographed associates, recorded license plates of everyone who entered or left the brownstone mansion. But this, a child appearing from nowhere, Marcus's visible shock, the strange interaction with the guard dog, this was something entirely different. Morrison zoomed in on the girl's face, capturing clear images in the fading light. Something about this situation felt significant, felt like the kind of unexpected development that changed investigations completely. He'd run her face through every database available. He'd find out who Sophia Chen was, where she'd come from, and why Marcus DeLuca looked at her as if he'd seen a ghost. As Marcus, Sophia, and Nero disappeared around the corner, Morrison made a note in his phone. Unknown female child, approximately 8 years old, Asian-European mixed heritage, appears to have established immediate connection with subject. Subject showed uncharacteristic emotional response. Investigate further. The October wind picked up, scattering leaves across the empty park bench where Sophia had waited. Night descended fully over Brooklyn, and in the brownstone mansion 3 blocks away, Marcus DeLuca's carefully ordered world was about to fracture in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The brownstone mansion stood on a tree-lined street in the quieter section of Bensonhurst, a 3-story structure that spoke of old money and careful restoration. Red brick facade, limestone trim, original ironwork on the windows. Marcus's home was a fortress disguised as elegant architecture. Security cameras monitored every angle, reinforced doors hid behind decorative exteriors, and the basement contained systems most homeowners would never need or want. Sophia's small hand remained on Nero's head as they climbed the front steps. The dog had positioned himself between the girl and the street, his massive body a living shield. Marcus noticed how naturally she moved with the animal, her steps unconsciously matching his pace, her hand finding exactly the right pressure to keep him calm and focused. "Elena will be inside," Marcus said, punching a code into the discreet keypad hidden beside the door. "She's worked for my family for 20 years. Don't be alarmed if she seems surprised. We don't often have visitors." The door opened into a marble-floored foyer that managed to be both elegant and intimidating. A crystal chandelier hung from the high ceiling, casting prismatic light across dark wood paneling and antique furniture. A grand staircase curved upward to the second floor, its banister carved from mahogany that had been in Marcus's family for 3 generations. Sophia stepped inside, her worn sneakers silent on the polished marble. Her eyes moved across the space with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. Not the wide-eyed wonder most children would show in such opulent surroundings, but something more complicated. Curiosity mixed with familiarity. "Mr. DeLuca? Is that you?" Elena's voice called from deeper in the house, probably from the kitchen where she spent most evenings preparing meals Marcus rarely ate. "You're back earlier than usual. Is everything—" She appeared in the doorway leading to the dining room and stopped dead. Elena Rossi was 62 years old, silver-haired, dressed in her customary dark slacks and simple blouse. She'd been with the DeLuca family since Marcus's father was still alive, had seen marriages and funerals, celebrations and tragedies, business dealings and family secrets. Very little surprised her anymore. But seeing Sophia standing in the foyer, one hand still resting on Nero's head, drained all color from Elena's face. The older woman gripped the doorframe, her knuckles going white, her mouth opening and closing without producing sound. Her eyes fixed on the girl with an intensity that bordered on shock, moved to Marcus with something like accusation, then back to Sophia with unmistakable recognition. "Elena." Marcus's voice sharpened with concern. In 20 years, he'd never seen his housekeeper react this way to anything. "Are you all right?" "Where—" Elena's voice cracked. She cleared her throat, tried again. "Where did you find her?" "The park on 18th Avenue. She was alone." "This is Sophia Chen." "Sophia, this is Elena Rossi. She manages this household and has known me since I was younger than you are now." Sophia offered a small smile. "Hello, Mrs. Rossi." Elena took 3 steps forward, her movements mechanical, her eyes never leaving Sophia's face. "Chen? You said Chen?" She looked at Marcus again, and he saw something in her expression he'd never seen before. Fear mixed with anger, mixed with something that looked almost like grief. "Rachel Chen's daughter?" The name hung in the air like smoke. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, his body tensing in ways that had nothing to do with physical threats and everything to do with emotional ones. "You knew Rachel?" "Did I know—" Elena's voice rose, then broke. She pressed one hand to her mouth, visibly struggling for composure. "Mr. DeLuca, we need to talk. Privately. Now." "Sophia." Marcus turned to the girl, forcing his voice to remain calm despite the sudden tension crackling through the foyer. "Why don't you sit in the living room? Through that door. Nero will stay with you. Elena, could you bring her something to eat? She's hungry." "I'm not that hungry," Sophia said quietly, but her stomach chose that moment to rumble, betraying her. She hadn't eaten properly in days, probably weeks. Elena nodded, still pale but regaining some professional composure. "Of course. I'll bring a tray. Soup, bread, something gentle on your stomach." She disappeared toward the kitchen, her movements quick and agitated. Marcus guided Sophia into the living room, a space dominated by leather furniture and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Adriana had decorated this room, had chosen every piece with care, trying to make it feel warm despite Marcus's preference for functionality over comfort. A fireplace stood cold and unused against one wall. Family photographs lined the mantel, Marcus and Adriana on their wedding day, Marcus with his parents before they died, various formal occasions that documented a life of careful public appearances. Sophia settled onto the sofa, Nero immediately lying down at her feet, his head resting on her small sneakers. She looked around the room with that same odd expression, studying details as if confirming something she already knew rather than discovering something new. "Your wife was very beautiful," Sophia said, looking at the wedding photograph. "My mom said you were married. She said your wife was a good person." Marcus felt something twist in his chest. "Your mother talked about me?" "Not a lot, but sometimes." Sophia's fingers twisted in Nero's fur. "She said you were complicated. She said you lived in a world that wasn't safe for children, and that's why she left. She said it was the hardest decision she ever made." "Sophia." Marcus sat in the chair opposite her, leaning forward, his hands clasped between his knees. "I need you to understand something. I didn't know Rachel was pregnant. I didn't know you existed until about 20 minutes ago. If I had known—" "You would have done what?" Sophia's eyes met his, and Marcus saw a painful wisdom there. the kind children develop when they're forced to understand adult realities too early. My mom said your world doesn't allow for mistakes or weaknesses. She said people in your position can't have unexpected children showing up. She said it would have been dangerous for both of us. Before Marcus could respond, Elena returned carrying a tray. Soup, bread, cheese, fruit. Simple food but elegantly prepared. She set it on the coffee table in front of Sophia, then straightened and looked at Marcus with an expression that clearly said they would be having a very serious conversation very soon. Eat slowly, Elena told Sophia, her voice softer now. Your stomach needs time to adjust if you haven't been eating regularly. Thank you, Mrs. Rossi. Sophia picked up the spoon, her manners impeccable despite her obvious hunger. Elena waited until Sophia was focused on the food, then jerked her head toward the hallway. Marcus rose, following her out of the living room and into his study, a smaller, more private space where he conducted business he preferred to keep away from the rest of the house. The moment the door closed, Elena whirled on him. 12 years ago, you came home with a gunshot wound. You said you'd been treated at a private clinic, that everything was handled. You lied. Marcus said nothing. Admitting lies to Elena felt pointless. She always knew, had always known when he was hiding something. Rachel Chen treated you. I knew there was someone, some woman. You were different when you came back, distracted, distant from Adriana in a way you'd never been before. Elena's hands clenched at her sides. 3 weeks later, Rachel showed up at the service entrance. It was early morning before you were awake. She was terrified, Mr. DeLuca. Absolutely terrified. Marcus's blood went cold. Rachel came here? To this house? She begged me not to tell you. She said she'd discovered she was pregnant, that she'd researched who you really were, and she knew what it would mean to bring a child into your world. She said she was leaving the city, disappearing, and she made me promise, made me swear, that I would never tell you about the baby. You've known for 12 years. Marcus's voice came out flat, dangerous. You've worked in this house, seen me every day, and never said a word. She made me promise. Elena's eyes flashed with rare defiance. She said if you knew you'd either try to keep the child, which would put them both in constant danger, or you'd send them away but keep tabs on them, which would amount to the same thing. She said the only way to keep that baby safe was for you to never know she existed. Marcus turned away, his hands gripping the edge of his desk hard enough to make his knuckles white. 12 years. 12 years of not knowing he had a daughter. 12 years of Rachel raising Sophia alone, struggling, probably barely surviving on a nurse's salary as a single mother. And Elena had known, had kept the secret, had watched him grieve Adriana's death and retreat into cold isolation, never once mentioning that somewhere out there, a part of him existed in the form of a small girl with his eyes and Rachel's courage. Why is she here now? Elena's voice softened slightly. Why did she come looking for you? Rachel died. And the aunt who was caring for Sophia died 3 weeks ago. She ran away from foster care. She said Rachel told her to come to Brooklyn, to wait at the park on 18th Avenue. Marcus turned back to Elena. Rachel told her someone would find her there. She meant you, Elena said quietly. That park, you walked past it every evening when you and Rachel were together. She must have known you still walked that route. She was counting on your habits, your patterns. Marcus moved to the window, looking out at the darkening street. A woman plans for her own death, tells her 8-year-old daughter where to find a father the child has never met, and trusts that 12 years of walking the same route will lead to an encounter. That's not hope, Elena, that's desperation. Rachel loved that girl more than anything, Elena said. She was protecting her the only way she knew how. And now Sophia is here, sitting in your living room, and you have to decide what to do about it. There's nothing to decide. I'll contact the appropriate authorities, make sure she's placed in a good home, establish a trust fund. You're lying to yourself. Elena's voice cut through his rationalization like a knife. I saw your face when you walked in with her. I saw how Nero reacted. That dog has been trained to protect you and nothing else, and he's out there right now with his head on that little girl's feet like she's the most important thing in the world. Dogs know, Mr. DeLuca. They sense things we miss. Marcus said nothing, because Elena was right. From the moment Nero had stopped his charge and sat before Sophia, Something had shifted. Something old and buried and carefully suppressed had cracked open in Marcus's chest. The possibility of connection, of family, of being something more than the cold, controlled man he'd become after Adriana's death. "I'll do DNA testing," Marcus said finally. "I have contacts who can rush the results. Until then, she stays here. It's not safe for her out there. Runaway foster children attract attention, and if anyone connects her to me—" He didn't finish the sentence. Both of them understood the implications. Marcus's enemies would see Sophia as leverage, as a pressure point, as a way to hurt him in the most effective way possible. The girl's best protection was either complete anonymity or complete security, and anonymity was no longer possible now that Detective Morrison and probably half the neighborhood had seen her with Marcus. "I'll prepare a room," Elena said, moving toward the door. "The blue bedroom on the second floor. It has its own bathroom and it's close to your room if—" She paused. "If she needs anything during the night." After Elena left, Marcus stood alone in his study, surrounded by the trappings of a life built on control and calculation. On his desk sat files detailing legitimate business ventures that barely concealed the reality of his operations. On the shelves, books on philosophy and strategy that he'd studied like sacred texts, learning how to survive in a world that valued strength over sentiment. And downstairs, in his living room, sat a small girl who might be his daughter, eating soup and petting his dog, waiting for him to decide whether to be a stranger or something more. Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts until he found the one he needed. "Doctor." Vincent Marchetti answered on the second ring, his voice cautious. "Marcus, it's late. I need a favor, Vincent. A DNA test, completely confidential. Results within 48 hours. A pause. "What's happened?" "Something I didn't expect. Something that changes everything." Marcus looked at the pendant Sophia had shown him, which he'd asked to borrow, and now sat on his desk, catching light from the lamp. The medical caduceus intertwined with the Italian horn, a gift he'd given to a woman who'd saved his life and then vanished. "Can you do it?" "For you? Of course. Send samples to my private office. I'll handle it personally." After ending the call, Marcus returned to the living room. Sophia had finished eating and now sat curled in the corner of the sofa, Nero's massive head resting in her lap. Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, her small body fighting sleep despite obvious fear of vulnerability. "Sophia," Marcus said gently, sitting in the chair across from her. "I need to be honest with you about something. I can't make any promises about being your father until we're sure. Do you understand what DNA testing is?" She nodded, her hand still moving rhythmically through Nero's fur. "They did it when my mom died, to make sure I was really hers for the legal stuff. It didn't hurt. I'm going to arrange for testing for both of us. Until we have results, you'll stay here as my guest. Elena is preparing a room for you. You'll be safe here, Sophia. Whatever happens, whatever we discover, you'll be safe. My mom said you would protect me," Sophia said quietly. "She said you were dangerous to your enemies, but never to people you cared about. She said if I ever needed help, if I was ever in real trouble, I should find you." Her eyes met his, dark and serious. "Am I in real trouble, Mr. DeLuca?" Marcus thought about Detective Morrison watching from across the street. He thought about his business associates who would see a child as a weakness to exploit. He thought about rival families who would use any leverage they could find. And he thought about foster care systems, social services, legal complications that could separate this girl from the only connection to her mother she had left. "Yes," he said honestly, "you're in real trouble. But not the kind your mother was afraid of. Not from me." Sophia's eyes closed, her exhaustion finally winning. Within moments, her breathing deepened into sleep, her small body finally relaxing after what must have been days or weeks of constant stress and fear. Marcus watched her sleep, this stranger who might be his daughter, and felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years, the weight of responsibility for someone other than himself. Nero's eyes opened briefly, meeting Marcus's gaze, and some silent understanding passed between man and dog. Protection, loyalty, duty. Elena appeared in the doorway, nodding toward the stairs. Together, carefully, Marcus lifted Sophia's sleeping form. She weighed almost nothing, all sharp angles and fragile bones. He carried her upstairs to the blue bedroom where Elena had already turned down the covers and left a lamp burning softly. As he laid Sophia on the bed, she stirred slightly, her hand reaching out instinctively. "Papa?" The word came out in a whisper, barely audible, spoken in sleep. Marcus froze. Papa. The Italian word for father, spoken with Sophia's slight accent, carried weight that transcended language. He pulled the blankets up to her chin, tucked them around her small form, and allowed himself one moment of vulnerability, his hand resting briefly on her dark hair, smoothing it back from her forehead the way he imagined fathers did for daughters they'd known since birth. "Sleep," he murmured. "You're safe now." Downstairs, his phone buzzed with incoming messages. Business that couldn't wait, decisions that needed making, the endless machinery of his empire requiring constant attention. But Marcus stood in the doorway of the blue bedroom for several long minutes, watching Sophia sleep, feeling the foundations of his carefully constructed life beginning to shift beneath his feet. Across the city, Detective Morrison uploaded the photographs he'd taken to a secure server. He typed a single line in his report. Potential new development in DeLuca case. Unknown child appeared claiming familial connection. Subject showed uncharacteristic emotional response. Investigating identity and origin of minor. Recommend increased surveillance and background check on Rachel Chen, deceased, Philadelphia. The investigation had just become significantly more complicated, and everyone involved, Marcus, Sophia, Elena, Morrison, understood that complications in this world rarely ended well. The DNA results arrived 47 hours later, delivered by Dr. Marchetti himself in a plain manila envelope. Marcus sat alone in his study, the morning light streaming through the windows, his coffee growing cold on the desk. His hand trembled slightly as he opened the envelope, a physical reaction he hadn't experienced in decades, not since the first time he'd pulled a trigger in his father's service at age 19. The words on the page were clinical, scientific, absolute. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. Sophia Chen was his daughter. Marcus set the paper down carefully, as if it might explode if handled roughly. For 2 days he'd existed in a state of suspension, treating Sophia with careful courtesy while maintaining emotional distance. She'd slept late that first morning, emerging from the blue bedroom looking small and lost in one of Elena's borrowed nightgowns. Elena had taken her shopping for clothes, school supplies, basic necessities, acting on instinct even before the test results confirmed what everyone in the household already knew. Because the truth was written in Sophia's face when you knew to look for it. The shape of her jaw, the set of her eyes, the way she carried herself with unconscious dignity despite circumstances that should have broken her spirit. She was Marcus's daughter in ways that transcended genetics, in temperament, in quiet strength, in the ability to remain calm while the world burned around her. A knock on the study door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," Marcus called, folding the test results and slipping them into his desk drawer. Elena entered, her expression grave. "Detective Morrison is at the front door. He's asking to speak with you about Sophia. He has documents from Child Protective Services in Philadelphia." Marcus's jaw tightened. He'd known this was coming, had expected it in fact, but the timing couldn't be worse. "Where's Sophia?" "In the garden with Nero. She's teaching him tricks apparently. That dog will sit, stay, and roll over for her like a trained puppy." Elena's mouth quirked slightly despite the tension. "It's remarkable, really. 5 years you've had that animal, and I've never seen him obey anyone but you. Now he follows that little girl around like she's made of steak. Let Morrison in. Offer him coffee. I'll be down in 5 minutes." Marcus stood, adjusting his shirt cuffs, slipping back into the armor of Marcus DeLuca, businessman and community leader, the public persona that hid everything the law couldn't prove but everyone suspected. Detective James Morrison waited in the foyer, his cheap suit and tired eyes marking him as NYPD rather than FBI. He held a folder under one arm and studied the family photographs on the walls with professional interest. He was 38, Marcus knew from his own background research. Divorced, no children, 12 years with the department, reputation for being thorough and incorruptible, which made him dangerous in ways more flexible officers weren't. "Detective Morrison." Marcus descended the stairs, extending his hand in a gesture of civilized cooperation. "What brings you to my home on a Saturday morning?" Morrison shook hands briefly, his grip firm but not challenging. "Mr. DeLuca, thank you for seeing me. I'm here about the child I observed you with 2 nights ago. Sophia Chen, age 8, reported missing from a foster home in Philadelphia 6 days ago. I need to verify her safety and determine the nature of your relationship with her. Would you like to speak in my study? Elena, coffee for the detective, please." Marcus led the way, every movement calculated to project openness and cooperation. Inside, he gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Sophia is safe. She appeared in my neighborhood 2 nights ago, alone and clearly in need of assistance. I brought her here, fed her, provided shelter. I've been attempting to determine the appropriate authorities to contact." Morrison's expression suggested he didn't believe a word of it, but he couldn't prove otherwise. He opened his folder, extracting several documents. Sophia Chen, mother Rachel Chen, died 8 months ago from complications related to a chronic illness. Father listed as unknown on the birth certificate. The child was placed with her maternal aunt, Jennifer Chen, who died suddenly 3 weeks ago from a stroke. Sophia was transferred to foster care in Philadelphia, where she stayed for exactly 4 days before running away. A child who's lost everyone she knows runs away from strangers. That seems understandable. Marcus kept his voice neutral, showing concern but not excessive interest. What's less understandable is why she would travel 200 miles to Brooklyn, to a specific park on 18th Avenue, and why you, of all people, would take her into your home without immediately contacting authorities. Morrison leaned forward slightly. "So let me ask you directly, Mr. DeLuca. What is your connection to Rachel Chen?" The moment of truth. Marcus could lie, could construct a story that would satisfy a police report while hiding the reality. But lies created complications, and complications endangered Sophia. Better to offer a version of the truth that served his purposes. "Rachel Chen was a nurse who treated me after an accident 12 years ago. We became acquainted. The relationship was brief. I didn't know she was pregnant when she left the city, and I had no knowledge of Sophia's existence until 2 nights ago." Marcus met Morrison's eyes steadily. "As of this morning, I have DNA test results confirming that Sophia is my biological daughter. I was preparing to contact my attorney to begin custody proceedings when you arrived." Morrison's expression flickered. Surprise, followed by calculation, followed by the kind of suspicion that came with years of dealing with men who told partial truths. "You're claiming parental rights to a child you've known for less than 48 hours? I'm claiming responsibility for my daughter. There's a difference." Marcus opened his desk drawer, extracting the DNA results and sliding them across the desk. "Dr. Vincent Marchetti is a respected geneticist. The testing was done properly, and the results are conclusive. Sophia is my child, and I intend to provide for her care and safety." Morrison studied the documents, his jaw tightening. "This doesn't automatically grant you custody, Mr. DeLuca. There are procedures, court hearings, home studies. Child Protective Services will need to evaluate whether your household is appropriate for raising a minor, and given your business interests, I suspect they'll have concerns. My business interests are entirely legitimate. I own several commercial properties, invest in local businesses, and maintain an impeccable tax record. You'll find nothing in my background that would prevent me from being an appropriate guardian." The threat was implicit but clear. Marcus had resources, lawyers, connections that could make any investigation very difficult for overworked, underfunded agencies. "Nothing you've been charged with," Morrison corrected. "That's not the same as nothing in your background." He stood, gathering his documents. "I'll need to speak with Sophia, alone. Standard procedure in these cases." "Of course. She's in the garden. I'll have Elena show you the way." Marcus remained seated, projecting confidence he didn't entirely feel. This conversation was a necessary step, but it exposed Sophia to scrutiny, questions, attention that could reveal things better left hidden. Morrison followed Elena through the house to the back garden, a walled space that Adriana had cultivated with care. Roses and herbs, a small fountain, stone pathways that caught morning sun. Sophia sat on a bench near the fountain, Nero lying at her feet. She was reading a book Elena had given her, one of Adriana's old volumes about Italian gardens. The girl looked up as Morrison approached, her expression wary, but not frightened. Nero's head rose, his body tensing in protective mode, but Sophia's hand on his head kept him calm. "Sophia, I'm Detective Morrison with the NYPD. I need to ask you some questions. Is that okay?" Morrison kept his voice gentle, non-threatening. "Okay." Sophia closed the book, her hands folding in her lap. That gesture of composure Marcus had noticed the first night, as if she'd been trained to remain still under observation. "Can you tell me why you left your foster home in Philadelphia? They were nice people, but they weren't my family. They had 3 other kids and everyone was always busy, and nobody knew my mom or had any pictures of her or could tell me stories about her." Sophia's voice remained steady, matter of fact. "I knew I had a father in Brooklyn. My mom told me before she died. She said if anything happened to Aunt Jennifer, I should come find him." "Your mother told you about Marcus DeLuca specifically?" "She didn't tell me his name. She just said my father lived in Brooklyn, that he walked past the park on 18th Avenue every evening, and that he had a big dog who would recognize me. She said the dog would know me somehow, and that would be my proof that I'd found the right person." Sophia looked down at Nero, her fingers tangling in his fur. And she was right. Nero knew me the second he saw me. Morrison studied the massive dog, who stared back with unsettling intelligence. Dogs don't typically recognize people they've never met. My mom said some things can't be explained, they just are. She said trust is more important than understanding. Sophia's eyes met Morrison's directly. "Are you going to take me away from here?" "I'm trying to determine what's best for you. That's my job, making sure children are safe and cared for properly." Morrison crouched down to Sophia's eye level, his expression softening. "Can you tell me honestly, do you feel safe here? Has Mr. DeLuca or anyone in this household done anything that made you uncomfortable or scared?" "No. Everyone has been very kind. Mrs. Rossi bought me clothes and books. Mr. DeLuca lets me spend time with Nero. They gave me my own room with a really soft bed and a bathroom that has soap that smells like flowers." Sophia's voice cracked slightly. "It's the first time since my mom died that I've felt like maybe things might be okay." Morrison saw the truth in her eyes, the desperate hope of a child who'd lost everything and found something unexpected. He'd dealt with enough foster situations, enough family complications, to recognize genuine connection when he saw it. But he'd also dealt with Marcus DeLuca's type before. Powerful men who bent systems to their will, who used money and influence to avoid consequences. "I'm going to need to file a report with Child Protective Services," Morrison said, standing. "They'll conduct an investigation, probably assign a caseworker, schedule home visits. The process takes time, Sophia. You might need to stay in temporary care while they evaluate whether Mr. DeLuca's home is appropriate." "No." The word came out sharp, surprising both Morrison and Sophia herself. "I came here to find my father. I found him. I'm not leaving." "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is." Sophia stood, Nero rising with her, the dog's body positioning itself between the girl and the detective. "I've been in the system for 3 weeks. I know how it works. I'll get moved from house to house and nobody will care that my mom died or that I finally found my dad. I'll just be another file, another kid nobody really wants." Her hands clenched at her sides. "I'm staying here. My mom said this is where I belong." Morrison opened his mouth to explain procedures, regulations, laws that governed these situations. But before he could speak, a sound from the front of the house interrupted them. Breaking glass, shouting. Then 3 sharp cracks that every person in that garden recognized instantly. Gunfire. Morrison's hand went to his service weapon as he spun toward the house. "Stay here, don't move." He ran toward the sound, his training overriding everything else. Sophia grabbed Nero's collar, her face pale but her hands steady. She'd heard those sounds before, in the Philadelphia neighborhood where her mother had raised her. The crack of gunfire that sent people ducking behind cars and running for cover. She knew what it meant. Danger. Violence. The kind of trouble her mother had tried to protect her from. Inside the house, Marcus had heard the front door crash open, had seen the 2 men force their way past Elena, had recognized the colors they wore, green and gold, the Bellini family's signature. Carlo Bellini's people moving fast and aggressive, carrying weapons openly in broad daylight. Marcus's hand moved to the desk drawer where he kept a weapon, but the men were already in the doorway, guns raised. Young men, early 20s, trying to make names for themselves through bold moves and stupid risks. "Marcus DeLuca," the taller one said, his voice shaking slightly despite the bravado. "Carlo Bellini sends his regards. He knows about the girl. He says if you want her back in one piece, you'll meet his terms for the waterfront contracts." So it had started. Word had spread faster than Marcus had anticipated. A child in his house, a weakness to exploit, leverage to use against him. The Bellini family had been pushing for control of shipping operations for months, and now they saw an opportunity to force Marcus's hand. "You break into my home," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying more menace than any shout. "You threaten me. You mention a child. You've made 3 very serious mistakes." "We haven't made any—" Detective Morrison appeared behind them, weapon drawn, police training evident in his stance. "NYPD, drop your weapons, now." The situation exploded into chaos. The younger man panicked, swung his gun toward Morrison. The detective fired twice, center mass professional accuracy that dropped the shooter instantly. The taller man spun, trying to bring his weapon around, and Marcus moved with speed that belied his age, closing the distance, disarming the attacker with brutal efficiency, putting him face down on the hardwood floor with one arm twisted behind his back. "Don't move," Marcus hissed in the man's ear. "You came into my home. You threatened my family. Give me one reason not to end you right here." "Marcus, don't." Morrison kept his weapon trained on the downed man. "He's restrained. It's over." But it wasn't over. Through the window, Marcus saw a third man running across the lawn toward the garden where Sophia waited. His heart seized. She was alone, unprotected except for Nero, and these men had come specifically for her. Marcus released the restrained attacker to Morrison and ran, his expensive shoes pounding across marble and hardwood, through the dining room and kitchen, bursting into the garden to find Nero standing over Sophia's crouched form, 130 pounds of pure protective rage. The dog had positioned himself as a living shield, his teeth bared, a low growl emanating from his chest that sounded like nothing human. The third attacker stood frozen 10 feet away, his weapon hanging uselessly at his side, his face white with terror. Because Nero wasn't just growling, the dog was ready to kill, every muscle tensed, waiting for any movement that would justify unleashing violence. And the attacker knew with absolute certainty that if he took one more step toward that little girl, the animal would tear him apart. "Drop the weapon," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Do it now, or I let the dog decide what happens next." The gun clattered to the stone pathway. The man's hands rose slowly, his eyes never leaving Nero's bared teeth. "I didn't sign up for this. Carlo said it would be easy. Just grab the kid, use her for leverage." "He didn't say anything about—" He gestured helplessly at the dog. "Get on your knees, hands behind your head." Marcus moved forward, positioning himself between the attacker and Sophia, though Nero showed no signs of moving from his protective stance. Behind him he heard Morrison calling for backup, using police codes that meant officer-involved shooting, multiple suspects, secure the scene. Sophia's small voice came from behind Nero's massive form. "Papa, are you okay? Papa." The word again, this time spoken fully conscious in a moment of crisis and fear. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. All the walls he'd built, all the emotional distance he'd maintained since Adriana's death, crumbling before the simple reality of his daughter calling for him in fear. "I'm okay, Sophia, stay right there." "Nero, guard." The dog's body relaxed slightly at the command, his protective position maintained but his aggression controlled. "Good boy. You're such a good boy." Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Morrison appeared in the garden doorway, his weapon still drawn, his expression grim. "2 in custody, 1 down. Scene is secure." His eyes moved to Sophia, then to Marcus. "The girl?" "Unharmed, thanks to Nero." Marcus crouched beside Sophia, his hand finding her shoulder. She was trembling now, the adrenaline and fear finally breaking through her composed exterior. "It's over. You're safe. They came for me," Sophia whispered. Because I'm here. Because of who you are. My mom was right. It's dangerous. Yes, Marcus said honestly, because lies serve no purpose now. It's dangerous. People in my world see vulnerabilities and exploit them. But that's going to change. He looked at Morrison, then at the restrained attacker. Everything is going to change. Within 30 minutes, the house was swarming with police. Crime scene techs photographed evidence. Uniformed officers took statements. Morrison's superiors arrived to assess the situation. Elena gave her statement with perfect composure, describing the break-in, the weapons, the clear intent to cause harm. Marcus provided his version: self-defense, protection of household members, cooperation with police response. And through it all, Sophia sat in the living room with Nero's head in her lap, answering questions from a child services caseworker with the same quiet composure she'd shown from the beginning. Yes, she felt safe with Mr. DeLuca. Yes, she wanted to stay here. No, she didn't feel threatened or coerced. Yes, she understood that dangerous people existed, but she also understood that Mr. DeLuca and Nero would protect her. Morrison pulled Marcus aside as the scene began to clear. The man who survived the one Morrison shot is in surgery. He'll live. The one Nero cornered is talking. Says Carlo Bellini ordered the hit. Wanted to grab Sophia for leverage. We've got enough to bring Bellini in for questioning. No, Marcus said quietly. You don't. Morrison's jaw tightened. Don't tell me you're going to handle this your way. Not this time. Not with your daughter involved. Bellini made a mistake and his people paid for it. He'll retreat now, regroup, and I'll deal with him through appropriate channels. Marcus's voice carried absolute certainty. But more importantly, this incident makes it very clear that Sophia cannot be moved into foster care or temporary housing. She's a target now. The only place she's safe is here with me, with security measures that no state facility can provide. Morrison wanted to argue, wanted to insist on procedures and regulations, but he'd seen the attack, had witnessed how close Sophia had come to being taken. I'll include my recommendations in the report, but Child Services makes the final call on placement. Then I'll need to speak with whoever makes that decision. Today, now. Because my daughter isn't leaving this house until I'm certain she's protected. Marcus straightened, slipping back into his public persona. Calm, controlled, absolutely immovable. Whatever it takes, detective. Whatever procedures need to be followed, whatever hoops need to be jumped through. My daughter stays with me. The words felt strange on his tongue. My daughter. But also right in ways Marcus couldn't fully articulate. 24 hours ago, Sophia had been a stranger. Now she was the only thing that mattered, the only priority that superseded business and reputation, and the carefully balanced power structures he'd spent decades building. Morrison studied Marcus for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'll make some calls. But Marcus, this changes everything. You understand that? Having a child means different choices, different priorities. It means being accountable to someone other than yourself. I know, Marcus said. And he did. Standing in his damaged home, surrounded by evidence of violence that had nearly touched his daughter, Marcus DeLuca understood that every calculation had changed. The DNA test confirmed biology, but the attack confirmed something more important. Sophia was his daughter not just in genetics but in reality, in responsibility, in the kind of commitment that transcended any business deal or territorial negotiation. In the living room, Sophia had fallen asleep against Nero's side, exhausted by trauma and fear and the adrenaline crash that followed survival. The dog remained motionless, barely breathing, his entire focus on protecting the small human who had somehow claimed him completely. Elena appeared beside Marcus, her voice low. That child needs you. Not your money, not your protection. You. The person Rachel saw 12 years ago, the person who showed her kindness when he was vulnerable. That's who Sophia came to find. That person died a long time ago, Marcus said quietly. No, he didn't. He's just been hiding. Elena's hand rested briefly on his arm. Don't make that little girl wait any longer to meet her father. 6 months had transformed everything. Marcus stood at the window of their new home in Fairfield, Connecticut, watching Sophia play in the backyard with Nero. Spring sunshine filtered through oak trees, casting dappled shadows across grass that had finally recovered from winter. The house was smaller than the Brooklyn brownstone, a colonial-style property with 4 bedrooms, a proper yard, and neighbors who knew nothing about Marcus DeLuca's past beyond what appeared in public records. Successful businessman, widower, single father. "Papa, watch this." Sophia's voice carried through the open window. She'd started calling him that naturally after the attack, and Marcus had stopped correcting her. The word had become as familiar as his own name. He watched as she demonstrated a new trick she'd taught Nero, the massive dog walking carefully on his hind legs for 3 steps before dropping back down and receiving enthusiastic praise. Sophia had discovered a gift for animal training, something that went beyond natural affinity into genuine talent. Marcus had enrolled her in classes, connected her with professional trainers, watched her confidence grow alongside her skills. The past 6 months had been complicated. Court hearings to establish custody, evaluations by child services, meetings with attorneys and social workers who scrutinized every aspect of Marcus's life and home. Detective Morrison had testified on his behalf, an unexpected ally who'd witnessed both the attack and Marcus's genuine transformation from distant businessman to protective father. The federal investigation into the DeLuca family's business operations had concluded with surprising results. Marcus had cooperated fully, providing information that led to indictments of several associates while carefully restructuring his own operations. The waterfront properties had been sold to legitimate developers. The connections to gray market enterprises had been severed. Marcus DeLuca emerged as what he'd always claimed to be, a businessman with a complicated past but a clean present. Carlo Bellini had been arrested 3 weeks after the attack, charged with conspiracy and attempted assault. His organization crumbled without leadership, territory absorbed by other families, or abandoned entirely. Marcus had watched it happen with detached satisfaction, knowing that his withdrawal from that world had created opportunities for others while eliminating threats to Sophia. "Mr. DeLuca?" Elena appeared in the doorway, her silver hair catching the afternoon light. She'd moved to Connecticut with them, refusing to retire despite Marcus's generous offers. "Sophia's tutor will arrive in an hour. Should I prepare snacks?" "Please, and Elena, thank you, for everything." Marcus turned from the window. "I know this wasn't what you signed up for 20 years ago." Elena's expression softened. "That little girl gave you back your life. Helping raise her is a privilege, not a burden." The custody hearing had been the turning point. Sophia had testified, not in open court but in a judge's chambers, answering questions about her life with Marcus, her feelings of safety, her wishes for the future. Marcus had watched through a video feed, his heart in his throat as his daughter spoke with quiet conviction about finding the father her mother had promised existed. The judge's ruling had been conditional. Temporary custody granted with monthly reviews, required therapy sessions for Sophia to process her trauma and losses, home visits by social workers, educational requirements met through private tutoring until Sophia felt ready for traditional school. But most importantly, recognition that Sophia Chen DeLuca belonged with her father. Marcus had added his surname to hers legally, a hyphenated connection that honored Rachel's sacrifice while claiming his own responsibility. Chen DeLuca, a bridge between 2 worlds, 2 heritages, 2 parents who'd loved her in different ways. Outside, Sophia collapsed onto the grass in a fit of giggles as Nero decided the training session was over and began licking her face with enthusiastic affection. The sound of her laughter carried through the window, something that had been rare in those first weeks but now came easily, naturally, a sign of healing that no therapy could manufacture. Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from his attorney. "Final paperwork approved. Full custody granted effective immediately. Congratulations." Full custody. No more monthly reviews, no more court-appointed supervision, no more proving himself worthy. Sophia was his daughter, legally and completely, and no one could change that. He found her still lying in the grass. Nero sprawled beside her, both of them breathing hard from play. Marcus sat on the bench near the garden, and Sophia immediately moved to join him, grass stains on her jeans and twigs in her hair. "Your attorney called," Marcus said, putting his arm around her shoulders. "The judge made the final decision. You're officially mine now, permanently." Sophia's smile was radiant. I was always yours, Papa. The judge just made it official. Your mother would be proud of you, of how brave you've been, how strong. Marcus's voice caught slightly. I wish I'd known her better. Wish I'd had more time. She told me stories about you, Sophia said quietly. She said you were the kind of person who protected people even when it cost you. She said you made her feel safe when she was scared. That's why she knew I should find you if anything happened to her. Marcus pulled an envelope from his pocket, something he'd been saving for this moment. Elena gave this to me last week. Your mother left it with her 12 years ago, instructions to give it to you when you were ready. Sophia's hands trembled as she opened the envelope, extracting a letter in Rachel's handwriting. Marcus looked away, giving her privacy, but heard her breath catch as she read her mother's final words. Words of love, explanation, hope that Sophia would find the father Rachel had known existed beneath the dangerous reputation. She says you have her courage and your strength, Sophia whispered, tears streaming down her face. She says together, we could be extraordinary. We already are, Marcus said, pulling her close. We're already extraordinary. Nero pushed his massive head between them, demanding inclusion in this moment of family connection. Sophia laughed through her tears, one hand on her father's arm, the other buried in the dog's fur. The three of them forming something Marcus had never expected to have again after Adriana's death. A family. Imperfect, unconventional, built from loss and chance and a fearless little girl who'd refused to run when a dangerous dog charged toward her. As the afternoon sun painted the Connecticut yard in golden light, Marcus DeLuca understood that every choice he'd made, every calculated risk, every careful maneuver through a dangerous world, had led to this moment. Sophia safe, loved, thriving. A future built not on power and control but on trust and connection. Detective Morrison visited occasionally, checking on Sophia's progress, maintaining the unlikely friendship that had formed during crisis. Marcus had helped Morrison with several community programs, using his resources and connections for legitimate good. Youth centers, scholarship funds, intervention programs for at-risk kids. The transformation was complete. Marcus DeLuca had left his old world behind, burned those bridges with finality that satisfied federal investigators and rival families alike. He was simply a father now, raising a remarkable daughter, building a life that honored the sacrifice Rachel had made to keep Sophia safe until the moment she could be found. Can we plant a garden? Sophia asked suddenly, looking at the empty flower beds near the house. Roses like Adriana had in Brooklyn? So I can learn about them? We can plant whatever you want, Marcus promised. This is your home, Sophia. Your forever home. She smiled, leaning against him, and Nero's tail thumped against the grass in contentment. Somewhere in the distance, children played, neighbors called greetings. Normal suburban life continued around them. A life Marcus had never imagined wanting, but now couldn't imagine living without. The past was behind them. The future stretched ahead, full of possibility and promise, and the ordinary miracles of family. And in that Connecticut backyard, 3 survivors, a man, a girl, and a dog, found peace.